Just shout when you are ready.
The recording is already running.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well, great. So yes, schönen guten Morgen. Herzlich willkommen to this webinar on knowledge management. My name is Pim Zwaan. I'm based out of the Netherlands, and I'm one of the solution consultants for Verint. I support basically the mainland Europe region, including Germany. My German isn't great, aber ich verstehe Deutsch. Sprechen ist ein bisschen schwierig. So most of these slides will actually be in English, but there are several German examples and demonstrations, so I hope that might help. So let's talk about knowledge, right? People say that knowledge is power, and we're going to talk about just that. We're going to talk about how knowledge management can empower your customer service employees, your customers, and even your bots. So let's take a few steps back. I mean, we've been talking about digital transformation for quite some time, right? And especially in the world of contact centers, people would have typically expected that those changes would take months, right? Maybe even years. But we, of course, all know that COVID last year accelerated this massively, right? I mean, in a matter of weeks or sometimes even days, entire contact centers switched from working from an office to working from home, which of course was gigantic. We're also seeing changes in the workforce. Right, there's a shift happening in the workforce with people from newer generations entering the work floor. I mean, I remember where I was on New Year's Eve going into the year 2000, and I actually remember that night like yesterday. But when you start then thinking about it, that in the organization that you work for, it might actually be that people are picking up, for example, the phone that were born after that night. Right, the new generation is here, and they're of course bringing a lot of digital influence as well. Also, of course, the other generations are seeing digital changes. Right, I mean, we all expect the Amazon experience at the speed of Google search. So ask yourself, if you think about a contact center that your organization has, how are people in that contact center able to use technology, right? Is it really meeting up to those standards of the technology that we now live in? The other thing that is, of course, clearly new is the uprising of bots. We're seeing bots handling simple tasks, providing automation suggestions to employees. We're seeing them help customers in web self-service settings. So how do you make sure that the knowledge that those bots are dependent on is of a good quality, right? And also consistent with what is being used internally. Last but not least, customers are expecting more than ever before, right? The rise of self-service, but also, of course, customers are always mobile. Even though they're working from home as well. But based on these new mobile technologies, customers can get into contact with an organization through more ways than just phone, right? I mean, in the olden days, it was phone, and then email happened, and then maybe web chat. If you now start counting the number of channels, right, you probably need more than just one hand than an organization supports. And for a customer, they don't see channels, right? They just see one experience, and they want the same high quality experience in all of those engagements. So we actually recognize these challenges as Verint, and we have a name for it. We call that the engagement capacity gap. And with time, the number of interactions might grow further, right? The number of new channels increases, the workforce dynamics will have a bigger impact. And of course, in order to cope with that increasing demand, you could hire more agents, or more employees, right? But you cannot do that forever. At some point, it becomes really important to work smarter, and working smarter thereby becomes the goal. This approach is what we call boundless customer engagement. And one of the solutions that plays a role in this is the Verint knowledge management solution that we're going to focus on today. For those participants, by the way, that do not know Verint really well, Verint does offer more than just knowledge management. Basically, I can walk into any contact center and say, what are your top 3 challenges? The only thing that we don't do is voice routing. So that's something that we still leave for the ACDs and the CCAS vendors. But all of these other things like scheduling and forecasting and quality monitoring, performance management, surveys, self-service, recording, you name it, those all capabilities that Verint offers. And they're all part of the Verint Cloud platform. Of course, running these capabilities in a SaaS setting has the benefit of being always up to date with software versions. It's easier and quicker to deploy, and you'll actually get an SLA to give you certainty of availability. But again, today we are going to mainly focus on knowledge. So what is then knowledge management, and why is it important? I mean, there have been many definitions for KM. But I actually just like to use this example. This is me. Well, actually, it's not me. It's a picture of a random person. But this is a question that I actually once asked to a contact center, right? When I was trying to fly with my kids across the Atlantic Ocean. And imagine that you were an agent, right? And you pick up the phone and you get this Pim Zwaan on the call, and he's asking this question. What would you do as an agent, right? Typically, agents would first try to answer it from the top of the head based on what they think they know, right? They actually might ask somebody that is sitting next to them. Well, actually, that's something that we did when we were still in office. So they might actually start a chat with a supervisor to ask. But hopefully, most of the knowledge that people are using is somewhere captured, right? And one of the places where knowledge is often captured is in printed out documents. But luckily, we're seeing more and more digital repositories, whether that's a SharePoint site, an intranet, file share, a wiki, right? Typically, an organization has a place where they store all of their content. The challenge, though, if you're a contact center agent and you do a search in one of those systems, you're going to either end up with a lot of results, right? Thousands of results, most of them being noise. Or and even if you did find the document that you were looking for, there is a chance that it might be a 12-page PDF document. And even if this process, right, looking up this question takes 2 or 3 minutes, that's not a big problem if you're sitting in the back office, right? But if you have a customer on the phone, you need to tell them, excuse me, sorry, I need to put you on hold. I actually found the document that I was looking for. Now give me a few seconds to actually consume this, and you have to scroll through that entire thing, right? That's not the experience that customer, but also not an employee, is looking for, right? And this is actually where we typically draw the line between what we call content management and knowledge management. So content management is really what your organization probably is already doing, right? The fact that a document exists is the reason why we're uploading it to SharePoint. Thereby, anybody can find all of the information that they're looking for. Well, actually, if I'm an agent, I don't want all the information. I just want that one answer to the question, right? So that's where we start talking about things like bite-sized knowledge, right? Information targeted to answer a specific question in a specific setting, depending on who I am, right? So it could be that a customer on web self-service or in a bot sees a different answer than the internal agent might, or actually the internal agent might actually see additional information on top of the public knowledge, but that allows them to use audience-specific knowledge. And again, if we wouldn't have had that capability in the solution, you would have had to create 2 knowledge articles, one, for example, for web self-service and one internally, but how you then manage consistency and all of those kind of challenges. So by capturing it all into single entities targeted at the task at hand, really allows you to optimize that experience. The last word on the slide, or actually the second to last, contextual. So one of the key capabilities is if you have lengthy PDF documents, imagine that the customer is talking about topic X, and by some magic software, the solution is able to prompt the relevant document. What would you want to have as a suggestion, right? Do you want to have a 12-page PDF document, or do you just want the answer to the customer's question, right? So being able to write down or break down knowledge into bite-sized pieces, that also creates the foundation for contextual knowledge, and I've got a couple of examples on that later. So I'm not going to go over this entire slide, right? But this, I think, is the main reason why I think knowledge management is of importance to an organization. It can have a significant business case, right? These are some of the high scores that we've seen at various different customers. And typically things that we impact are support costs that would go down, handle time that would go down, first contact resolution, right? If the quality of your calls goes up because people are giving the right answers, you'll actually avoid second calls and those kind of good things. Training costs, I think, is a big one as well. Seeing a double-digit reduction in training time is not an exception. So imagine that it allows you to speed up the new employees faster so that they can pick up phone calls earlier. That's by itself is sometimes already a benefit that can pay for a KM implementation. So why then Verint? Right, so Verint has been doing knowledge management for more than 20 years. And we've accomplished all of those business cases that I've just showed you based on some of the key capabilities. Again, I'm not going to go over all of these slides because today we just wanted to give you an introduction. There are two things though on this slide that I want to highlight: search automation and automated clustering. So automation, of course, is more important than ever. And the solution allows you to search for what you mean rather than search for what you type. So it has a pre-built language model, and yes, there is one for German as well. And based on that language model, the solution offers what we call cognitive matching. So if you search for Änderung, it will automatically also search for modificeren, if that came across right. And that's something that a customer or an employee doesn't have to think about. It's something that the solution does for them, which of course allows them to get better search results. Another concept mentioned here is knowledge as a service. Like I said, the solution offers all of those capabilities that we just talked about, regardless of the audience and channel. So in other words, the solution can empower multiple audiences, all from within a single repository, which could, of course, be separated depending on roles and rights. But it does allow you to have a single instance for internal users, for customer self-service with FAQs, so that customers do not have to pick up the phone, and sometimes that even avoids contacts coming into the contact center, but also bots, right? I mean, in the last few years, the number of bots that I've seen has massively increased, and many of those bots or virtual assistants actually have their own repository of Q&As, which creates an additional knowledge silo, right? Which is something that you want to avoid. I mean, if you have a good knowledge repository somewhere centrally, it probably makes more sense to have that bot tap into that knowledge to drive the quality and the consistency of the experience. And using one solution for multiple different audiences is something that we do basically in every project. Here's an example. BMW Group, this I think example is from the UK. They actually use it for 4 different audiences. So they use it for the contact center. If you go to their online pages, you'll find the Online Genius, which is yet another representation of that same knowledge base. If you go into a dealership, the people there will actually use the Online Genius as well. You can imagine that they will see additional information or different information that a customer wouldn't see online. And last but not least, even other internal employees have access to knowledge, all from within a single repository, which of course drives the consistency. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of more detailed examples, starting with the employee experience. So you'll see some of the capabilities, right? But it is really good to remember that these capabilities are built to support the vision of the solution, right? Making sure that information is easy to find, easy to access, easy to provide feedback on, and of course, share what you know. I mean, ideally, you want your best employees to share what they know so that the less mature, the less senior employees can tap into that knowledge, right? And having a system to manage that for you is the key goal. So imagine I'm an agent and I'm getting an important phone call. the customer that is calling me up is mentioning that they want to modify their address, right? And as soon as I then as an agent start typing, you'll see that the solution is already giving me search results. And it is important here that none of these items actually contain the word modificeren. So I did already mention that earlier. This is what we call cognitive matching. So this shows that it understands meanings and concepts. This is pre-trained, right? It works on a pre-built language model. So it doesn't have to require training or supported support learning and those kind of good things. It just works on day one, and it works for important languages like German, but also Dutch, English, French, Spanish, and a lot more. And as a result, of course, me being able to find the right information results, of course, in a lower handling time and increase in first contact resolution. So if we zoom into this FAQ a little bit, you'll actually see that this FAQ consists of two different fields. There's a public answer or an öffentlich antwoord, and there's an answer for an employee. And since we're now looking at the agent experience, the agent can actually see both the public as well as the private information. So this shows that the solution supports role-based content, not only on an article level, right, but also on fields within articles. And again, if we wouldn't have had this capability, you would have had to create two different articles, right? One for the public and one for private, and then you have to manage consistency yourself. But by doing it all within a single entity, just offers a lot of benefits. At the bottom of an article, because we know what an article is about, we can also say, well, based on this article, these articles are similar, which of course mimics the human train of thought. And if I then were to click on one of these, for example, here we're seeing a decision tree. So decision trees are a good alternative to lengthy PDF files, or sometimes we still see Visio flowcharts being used in contact centers. And this allows me to go in a sort of step-by-step fashion through a complex process. I can go back in time and make alternative choices, but you can imagine that for a new hire or for a not so experienced employee, or even for a senior employee just managing a complex process, this can massively help them do their job. And again, this is something that you can do while you're on the phone with an agent, with a customer, right? You don't have to put the customer on hold in order to digest a lengthy document. Managing these, by the way, is something that is there's a graphical editor for this, so anybody can create decision trees if they're entitled to. It's not an IT tool, right? It's something that is designed to empower the subject matter experts on creating these. There are also things like alerts, right, allowing you to communicate time-sensitive changes. Right. Typically, we see that contact centers still use daily emails to say this and these are the things that happened. How do you keep track of that as an agent? But also, how do you keep track of that as an organization? So you can say, I read this and understood this, which is then also logged for reporting purposes. And yes, of course, we know that in Germany there are this thing called working councils that might not allow you to track certain agent behavior, but those are things that we can disable as well. So, and last but not least, the thing that I think makes sense to mention is feedback, right? The people that know best when something is out of date are the employees themselves. So allow them to provide feedback, which will go into a workflow, right? So it's I don't understand this answer, it's out of date, right? Or here's some textual feedback on this, which will go to a group of users that can then make the changes. Another type of feedback is missing content. So imagine that I did a search, I didn't find what I was looking for, so I might actually have a suggestion for the knowledge that I think should be there. This would then be sent to a group of people that then can create a relevant knowledge. So all of what you just saw is an out-of-the-box user interface, right? But we're seeing more and more integrations of KM into telephony solutions, but also into CRM solutions. Just a couple of examples here, right, of CCaaS as well as CRM. We built these integrations using APIs. Basically, the entire solution is built on APIs, allowing you to integrate and use the knowledge in external applications as well, or on the website or in bots. So just to give you a couple of examples, this is a vaya, where in this scenario, I've got a chat that is coming in. This is not Verint technology, right? This is a vaya. The only thing that we've built together with a vaya is the widget that is seamlessly blended into these channels. So as soon as a customer starts typing certain things, right, you'll see actually that the knowledge articles that are being suggested are coming from KM Pro or from the Verint KM solution. And with a simple click of a button, I can actually then insert that answer back into the chat. You can imagine that if you had to type this out manually, compared to that, it will massively impact AHT and of course drive the consistency and the quality of the service. Another example is CRM. Right, imagine that you have an email that is happening within the CRM system. In this scenario, the customer is unable to connect the modem. The knowledge base that you're seeing here is actually from Verint in this screenshot, where these articles are actually suggested to the customer, to the agent based on the case that they're working on. So this is not something that I had to manually type in or search for. No, this is something that the system does for me. And this really has a significant impact on the user adoption, right? I mean, if knowledge is already here, why wouldn't you use it? And this is also why having bite-sized knowledge makes so much sense, right? Because if there's an answer in here that we can copy and paste into the email with a single click, that also impacts the handling time. Okay, from a customer perspective, we did talk about customer self-service, right? If you have a good knowledge base, why not show a section of that knowledge or certain fields within those knowledge articles to customers? This allows customers, of course, to access knowledge 24/7, which of course impacts the number of interactions into the contact center because it typically reduces it. Just to give you a couple of examples, this is FedEx. Actually in German. I think it's part of their Hilfe Center. So it's something that you can test out yourself as well. It's running on Verint KM Pro, and it uses the same cognitive matching capabilities, right? So in this example, I searched not for product, I didn't search for code, right? But it's still offering that as an answer. And that's indeed another example of the cognitive search capabilities that understands what I mean rather than what I type. And all of the other capabilities that we saw earlier, things like decision trees, etc., feedback, all of that can be enabled for web self-service as well. So another example is Fidelity. Fidelity is an investment organization, I think mostly targeted at English-speaking customers in the world. They use knowledge, for example, on their UK site, for example, in the help and support section. And again, an example of that cognitive matching capability. If I search for save for my daughter, the answer that I'm getting is how can I invest for a child? Right? I didn't search for investing. I didn't search for children. I searched for saving for my daughter. Right? So again, the system understands meanings and concepts which will impact the number of good search results. If I then open it, more of the same, you'll see the same feedback, you'll see the same related questions. Again, this is all powered through the APIs using the same knowledge base. And you can imagine that if I'm an internal agent, I might actually also see this customer-facing knowledge article plus additional internal information. Again, all of that knowledge is coming from a same single instance. What I like about the site of Fidelity is that they've also built a widget. So if you want to open, for example, an account, you'll see a widget with commonly asked questions regarding this page. We've seen that offering suggestions as part of a process actually increases the likelihood of people continuing the web form. So actually KM can help increase conversion rates of sales pages. If you go to the login page, you'll see the same widget, but do know that there are no questions here related to opening account. Now all of these questions are related to logging in and those kind of issues. So knowledge doesn't have to be a click away. It can actually be embedded as part of the process, and the likelihood of people using it, of course, is higher in this fashion. I'm quickly going to skip over this one for the sake of time because I did want to mention bots. Like I said, we're seeing more and more bots Most of them have a built-in Q&A database, and that of course creates another silo. What we of course say, well, if you have a good knowledge management solution, why not tap that knowledge, that bot into that knowledge? And whether that's actually Verint bots or virtual assistants that do that, or whether that's an external bot, that doesn't really matter, because it always uses the same APIs to fetch the knowledge from the system. And actually that ties to another example, right, of where we say knowledge is really at the center of everything, which is something that Veron does believe in. Like I said, Veron does offer more than just KM. Like I said, we can almost fix any problem in a contact center, and many of those capabilities we tie to knowledge. So to give you an example, Florius is a mortgage company in the Netherlands. Based on what people are saying on the phone, Verint technology is driving knowledge suggestions to the agent. So that way, the agent doesn't even have to type any word in order to perform a search. Now, based on what the customer is actually saying, the system does the searches for the agent. That, of course, allows a agent to focus on the conversation rather than focus on search, if that makes sense, which, of course, has a significant impact on both the agent as well as the customer experience. And again, that's not something that we do in a lab, right, where we try innovative stuff. No, these are actually things that we're helping customers with, all by positioning KM as part of a core element of the process. So to wrap up, let's start out or go back to the question that we started out with, right? So why is knowledge management important? Well, I do believe it is the one investment that can help drive omni-channel experiences, right? It can help self-service as well as deflect interactions, and those interactions that then remain into the contact center, they can be handled quicker and better. Of course, I am biased to believe that Verint is the best vendor for this, but let me leave it like this, right? If you have to choose between doing KM with one of our competitors or not do KM at all, I would still urge you to invest in the management of knowledge, because I truly believe that knowledge is a great stepping stone towards a better customer experience. And hopefully, if you start looking at investing in KM, you'll have a chat with us in that process as well. Okay, thank you.